Hello, my name is Jessie Thomson, and I am a social worker. I have had the privilege of working with Mercer County School District this last year as an intern, working on the last 2 semesters of my master's degree in social work. And I am very honored to say that I get to continue working with the school district as a school social worker and counselor beginning next year. And I have had this opportunity to share a video with you um, to discuss Mental Health Awareness Month. And I thought I would do that by giving you some insight into social emotional learning, which is something that we're doing in the schools for our students. But this is something that at any age we can take in and keep what tools and skills from those lessons that might help us in our everyday life. So I thought I would kind of give you an idea of that by talking about behavior today and about self-regulation versus self-control. I thought I'd do that by sharing a PowerPoint with you. So give me a moment to share my screen. Okay, so self-regulation versus self-control, changing our mindset to change our behavior. And I must say that I do not own any of the pictures I've used. I've borrowed them from online, so I want to mention that. But okay, so getting into it, what is self-control? It's restraint exercised over one's own impulses, emotions, or desires. So to sum up those words, we can say that it is stopping ourselves in that moment when we want to push the button. We're just compelled to do something, or we have to struggle to overcome that urge to do something or say something, feel something, trying to control that impulse. Compare that to self-regulation. They sound very much the same. So what is self-regulation? What does that mean? Control or supervision from within instead of by an external authority. The bringing of oneself or itself into a state of order, method, or uniformity. All those words aside, I thought this picture would be a good explanation. Think of the self-regulation these children are showing in playing a game together. It would be very easy to be frustrated that you aren't winning the game, or you might be embarrassed because you made a play that went in a bad direction and maybe your friends thought it was funny and so you're embarrassed. Or how do we regulate ourselves? We do that in everything we're doing. Right now, you're regulating yourself to listen to my voice and watch this video and pay attention, to stay seated, to stay calm, to listen and take in what you're hearing and seeing. These are all parts of self-regulation. And so I look at that and think that self-control is definitely an element of self-regulation. Self-regulation is that larger umbrella that encompasses so many aspects of what we try and do in our everyday lives for functioning. We need motivation, we need self-control, we need emotional awareness, we need self-esteem to self-regulate. We need social empathy, thinking about others and our social structures, being aware of society around us, being aware of others, being able to adapt and being resilient. All of those things are aspects of self-regulation. So one is situational, the other is ongoing. So think about that choice from the picture there. Control of self in the moment a behavior occurs or a situation presents itself. It is so easy to just say one piece of chocolate, right? But we have a choice in that moment of self-control, that instant where we say, no, I'm going to pick the apple instead. And then the subsequent feelings after that, we can say that maybe that is more part of that self-regulation. So regulation of self to actively work, to adjust, adapt, and respond in the ways that work best for you, to create a pattern of response and resiliency. So we want to not just overcome that moment when we're trying to express self-control. We want to actually create a pattern or a cycle of being able to self-regulate in those moments. So that way, when that instance comes on, we have tools in our pocket that we can use. We can have experiences we've learned from to pull from, and we can feel like we are in more control of those behaviors and those emotions and those feelings in each one of those instances as they pop up. How does this help me? How does knowing the difference between self-control or self-regulation help me? Why does knowing this difference make a difference to me? Well, what are we trying to control? What exactly needs regulating? When we hear the word behavior, I think lots of times when you hear that word behavior, it might come with some negative connotations, some negative thoughts, as in bad behavior. That's not appropriate behavior that we're seeing. Well, let's just look at behavior for a moment. Internal behavior could be described as, emotional regulation, those emotions that you feel. Um, that are triggered by experiences or memories, or by a specific instance that comes up. External behaviors might be our action regulation, how we respond to those emotions or those situations. Sometimes we want to acquire new habits. We have some old habits that maybe have not been working for us. And so, what are some new habits that we can create through changing our behavior, through self regulation, that can help us? Whether the need for self regulation is internal or external, the focus is commonly on the presence of a non productive behavior or the absence of a desired behavior. So maybe something hasn't been working for us. We've been doing the same thing over and over, and it's just not working well. Or I would like to get to a place where this behavior is a norm for me, and I feel like I would feel better. And so, what can I do to make that a part of my everyday pattern? Okay, what do we know about behavior then? Human behavior theory continues to provide an array of insightful perspectives to examine. Why do we do the things we do? Why do we think the way we think, feel the way we feel? Why do we react a certain way or have a certain behavior in response to a stimulus? Why do we do these things? That is probably a topic for a whole nother discussion, but I just put a few theories in these slides. I will not go over them. It takes so much time, but systems theory, conflict theory, rational choice, social construction, psychodynamic, developmental, social behavioral, humanistic. There are many different theories, different ideas and studies and research looking into why do we do these things? Why do we behave the way that we do? So where does all of this information take us, all these perspectives? I feel when we are looking at self-regulation and we're looking at truly building ourselves up and coming to a place where we're able to self-regulate in our own way that works for us, we need to take that focus off of the behavior, take the labels as good behavior, bad behavior off of those feelings and those focuses, and instead look at yourself as a whole person. Accept yourself as who you are, behaviors and all, and seek to do some of these things. Understand your perceptions, understand the way you look at things and feel about them and think about them, and how they compare to the social structures around you. We cannot escape our social structures. We need society, we need people around us, we have relationships, we have people we learn from and confide in and trust in. So we have social structures. So how do your thoughts and perceptions compare to those social structures around you? Really think about that. Identify your thoughts and the interactions that trigger your emotions. Emotions are connected to our thoughts, to our experiences. Our minds are connected to our bodies and our physical responses. So, what types of things trigger emotions in you? Name those emotions, name those triggers, see if you can find them. It takes time. Sometimes it takes a while to figure out, oh, that's what's been causing that feeling to come up inside, and I can put a name on it now. Be able to name it and understand it. Describe it to yourself in a way that can make sense. I know children often have a very difficult time naming emotions, really pinpointing what am I feeling and what is causing this feeling. And we can help them identify that, discuss it, and talk about it. And when you can do that, even as adults, it takes some of that power away from that feeling and gives it back to you so that you can find a way to overcome it. Be able to describe the behaviors that those emotions incite in you. I have this feeling, and I've noticed when I have this feeling, I typically do this. I typically do something in a certain way when I have that emotion. Is it working for me? Is that something that makes me feel good after I behave that way or after I respond that way? Maybe it is. Maybe it works well for you. Maybe not. How can we look at that and say, okay, I want to change this pattern? No matter what, you are fantastic. Do not let this behavior define who you are. It is just a small part of who you are, and you are wonderfully made. Move the behavior debate into a specific plan of action geared towards individual effectiveness. So we kind of look at this wheel: emotional awareness, then to behavior identification, strategy implementation, self-regulation, and goal attainment. I thought it'd be easier if I just gave some examples of what this kind of plan might look like in place. So for me, if I am having a down mood, if I'm feeling blue, if I just can't quite find that drive to pull myself out of it, typically I find that my behavior is it's hard to get off the couch. It's hard to get out of my yoga pants, and it's hard to put my phone down or whatever device I'm on and pull myself out of that mood. That's the behavior I've identified when I get into that down mood. So now that I know that, I can name that feeling that I have, and I recognize that behavior that I typically have when I have that feeling. What can I do about it? What plan can I put in place instead of just staying there on the couch? An example might be that a very simple action could be getting up and watering my plants. It doesn't sound like much, but at the same time, when I do that, I'm up, I'm moving, I'm tending to something, I'm caring for it, I'm seeing progress in that plant. I can tell that it likes the water I'm giving it. And by the time I'm up and moving, I might decide that I want to do something else after I'm done watering the plants. So it's a simple strategy, but it might be very effective. And if that one doesn't work, then I'm going to have another one. I'm going to have a plan B. So what does self-regulation have to do with this? Self-regulation is important because this is a continual thing. This won't just be, oh, I've solved it and now I'm done. We're constantly self-regulating. We're constantly gauging what we're feeling inside versus what we're thinking versus what we're doing about it. So we want to have these plans in place, if we can, to combat whatever comes up, to have it there and ready depending on what happens. And we want to set a goal when we're ready to say, okay, I think when I get to a point where I don't have to go through my list or I don't have to think it through before I do it, it just comes to me and I can work through it almost as a reaction. That might be your goal, or you might have a different one, but it kind of gives you an example of working through this kind of cycle of self-regulation. So a big part of self-regulation is being motivated to do it, creating motivation for commitment. Part of that, I believe, is having self-esteem. This is something that is so much easier said than done. Building your self-worth provides a lasting foundation for seeking self-regulation. That makes sense. If you have self-esteem, if you are building on your self-worth and are caring for yourself, you want to go through that process of doing what you need to do to take care of yourself. Self-esteem takes time to acquire. This process and the process of self-regulation require genuinely getting to know yourself and appreciate the diverse and unique aspects of who you are and what is important to you. The other side is social empathy, including your social structures and your environment, the people around you, assisting you in the social learning process. Empathy, putting yourself in someone else's shoes, can be a motivator for actively working towards self-regulation. When you have awareness of those around you and the reciprocity of actions, that give and take of our actions and how they affect others and how their actions affect us, when you have an awareness of that, the desire to self-regulate grows and becomes that catalyst for change that we're looking for. Um, Not to gain approval from someone else, not to change who you are to please others, but because you care for others. You just genuinely care about that social structure around you, those around you. Hopefully, they're caring for you back the same way. And then you're working towards bettering yourself and having those abilities and skills to regulate yourself in a way that helps you feel comfortable within those social structures that you're in. When you understand your behavioral responses to emotional triggers, what is causing me to act this way? You can identify strategies that will help you to self-regulate. The goal is to actively participate in practicing the planned strategies to eventually be able to self-regulate and to be patient when this just simply isn't possible. Sometimes the best laid plans just don't work out. So we need that resiliency, keeping that motivation in mind and trying to say, okay, that didn't work. I went back to that old way, and that's okay. Next time, maybe I'll try something different. But we need to keep practicing it, keep trying and see what works for us. You can monitor and adapt your behavior to increase self-regulation abilities. You can do this through observing others. You have people around you that you have seen handle a situation a certain way, and you say, wow, boy, if I was in their shoes, I would have totally panicked. I would not have known how to act. I probably would have gotten mad. How do they do that? So you can observe others, see how they react to things. What is their plan and process for dealing with situations that trigger those emotions. You also can self-monitor, pay attention to what triggers your negative emotions. Notice your typical responses. What are those things that you typically would do? Take note of it. Sometimes we don't even realize how often we get into that pattern of behavior or action. And then determine, is this the pattern that you want to follow? Is this something that you really say, this speaks to me, this works for me, this is something I'm really proud of as a part of who I am? Or is your reaction something that it's not working for you? And if anything, maybe it creates even more negative emotions in you once it's done, that you've gotten into this tailspin of regretting it or being upset with yourself. Kind of figure out what is working for you and what isn't. Practicing, find a trusted friend to talk it through with, bouncing your perceptions off of theirs, and opening your mind to other perspectives. This is a really valuable part of that self-introspection, is getting other people's points of view. And then visual supports, keeping a token of your goals as a visual reminder of the plan you've created for yourself. This works for some people, and for others, it's not so practical. But if it works for you, sometimes just having that something in your pocket, or a picture on your phone, or a verse in your purse, something like that, you can keep it with you, and it helps to remind you of the plan you've got in place for yourself. Using these strategies can assist with identifying effective tools in each of the zones or internal and external areas of emotional response you find yourself in. Check in with someone. Please include someone in this process with you. Confiding in a trusted friend, family member, or person in your life that knows what you're trying to accomplish can assist you in taking ownership of this plan. And it also creates accountability to seeing it through. But even more than that, we need people. And I hope each and every one of you has one person in your life, at least, that you can talk to, that you can confide in, that you can bounce ideas off of, that you can be honest with, and that will support you in what you're trying to accomplish. And we can be that person for somebody else as well. Sometimes we don't even realize when we are being that person for someone. So that's why it's always so important to be kind, to be open to someone's conversation with you, and to really be a good listener on both sides of that conversation. Another aspect of awareness that the individual explores and considers is how he or she reacts to both expected and unexpected behaviors in the different areas of their social constructs. Okay, that's a lot of words and mumbo, But what that kind of, let's look at that. Guidelines an individual should possess to more effectively self-regulate, thereby having more success at reaching desired goals. Learning spoken and unspoken social rules. They're out there. We may like some of them, we may hate some of them. There are social rules around us depending on our social structures and our social relationships and where we're at in our lives. There are spoken and unspoken rules. Examine them, educate yourself on them, look at them, and get to know them. This helps us to interpret the reactions of others around us. Sometimes misunderstandings can happen when we don't understand that reaction we get from a person. We need to discuss it and communicate and see if we can't dive into that and find out what is your perspective on that. Understanding the perspectives and emotions of others helps us to find our place and that we're comfortable with, that is in our control, where we feel like we want to fit into that social group and social structure. Self-regulation requires parameters. It requires guidelines to gauge what is expected of the individual, both by themselves and by the society they participate in. The individual is able to receive social signals from the other person, interpret them, and respond in a regulated way that shows the other person their message is being heard and understood. Empathy assists us. Walking in someone else's shoes assists us to respond to others in a way that shows conscious consideration for the person's current state of being and their expressed perceptions. This is an ongoing process. This presentation and my words to you today are just an overview of what this is. And it takes time, and everybody's situation is different, and everybody approaches this a different way. But please know it's ongoing. It's not a race defined by winning or losing or even a finish line. It's ongoing. But once self-awareness and social awareness are part of your perception, self-regulation techniques assist the individual to monitor and adapt their behaviors, strengthening their ability to reach their personal and social goals. The employment of this strategy takes the focus away from good behavior versus bad behavior and puts it on the process of self-regulation. Just thinking about that in a moment in context to a student in a classroom, let's take away the thoughts of good versus bad and putting that on a person or a child and say, this is a process of self-regulation. What is causing, what trigger or emotion is causing that behavior that I'm seeing? And how can we help that person to self-regulate in those instances? Can I be a person that helps them? The judgmental labels are removed. Instead, the individual is encouraged to view all their thoughts, emotions, and behaviors as having a purpose and a place, depending on the environment, circumstances, social situation, and their personal goals. This process requires planning, patience, and participation on the part of the individual and on those around them. We are all human. Remembering that strategies are so much easier to enact when a person is in a regulated state. It's so much easier to talk through a plan or talk through your tools and skills when you're calm and there aren't any triggers around you. But there will be instances in which the best laid plans are ineffective due to the individual's circumstances, moving beyond what he or she is able to contend with. There will be times when it's just too big, it's just too much. And that's okay. That's okay. Find someone to talk to. Find that resource that can help you through that time when it's too hard. And then come back when you are calm and when you are regulated and say, okay, I need to kind of renew my plan and see what else I can do from here. Self-regulation is ongoing. When an individual successfully self-regulates, the subsequent behaviors are guided by those efforts and are aligned with the goals set by the individual through their planned strategies. Human behavior theories show how dependent behavior is on circumstances. We react. We act when things happen. Our behavior sometimes is almost directed by circumstances, or at least it feels that way. When the focus is solely on behavior, how you're acting, and trying to correct it, the outcomes of those efforts will be dependent on the circumstances. It takes that power away from the person. When the focus is on the person as a whole and using strategies that encourage and grow self-regulating skills, The outcomes of those efforts will be dependent on the individual. They have more control. They are able to regulate. They are able to use those skills and tools and grow them and rely on supports and be a support for someone else. And when you put those outcomes on the individual and their self-regulating strategies, the possibilities are endless. Just some references for you. Okay. So hopefully that was kind of an insight into an idea of social emotional learning, ways of thinking and a mindset, resiliency and grit and growth, and being patient and being empathetic and knowing that all we can do is work together and talk it through and communicate. So I hope that this gives you some ideas for maybe yourself, maybe for someone you care about. But I appreciate being able to share some insight with you on an idea in this area. And other resources that you can lean on, our county is very blessed and very progressive, and we have wonderful supports in our county. So please look to our health departments, look to the crisis center, look to our clinic and our specialists. If you have those moments where things are too big and it's just those strategies just aren't working, there are things out there, there are people out there that want to help, that can help, and we're all in this together. So I'm going to go keep working on my self-regulation, and thank you for listening. Take care.